Kia ora, and welcome to another video celebrating World Breastfeeding Week 2020. This is intended as a platform to share diverse experiences and information, and we hope that you find this series supportive and informative. It is important to note that these are personal stories and opinions and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women's Health Action or our funders. Please seek advice from your health professional before making any important decisions about infant or young child feeding.
Kia ora, welcome to another World Breastfeeding Week video. Today I'm really excited to be joined by an amazing mama, Marie Gray, to chat about her breastfeeding journeys. Marie has a wealth of knowledge and experience. She's used the supplementary nursing system, struggled with supply issues, and has also trained as a breastfeeding peer counsellor. So welcome, Marie. Thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your whanau?
So I have two boys who are now 10 and 6. I had a lovely home birth with my eldest boy, and I had come from a breastfeeding whanau, in the sense that I was breastfed, my siblings were breastfed, everyone in my family breastfed their babies. And so I had an expectation that it was just going to go really easily because that had been my experience and my observation, and it didn't.
Right, and that's going to be something I guess we'll get into. So whereabouts do you live? Are you
Christchurch.
Oh, okay, cool. Right, nice. Excellent. So did you want to tell us, I guess, a bit about that journey and how things went for you, your first and second time, and what you've learned over the years?
So as I mentioned, with my eldest boy, who's now 10, I'd had a great birth. Everything went really well, and I had anticipated breastfeeding going really well as well. And basically, when my son was weighed at the day 6 or something it was, he lost 600 grams, which was a considerable weight loss for a wee baby.
Yeah.
And I had been having lots of issues with latching over that week. And as it turned out, actually, he had a tongue tie, and that was a large part of what was responsible for the latching issues. So at that point in time, we needed to supplement because he lost all that weight.
Yeah.
And we were supplementing with formula with a bottle, and we got the tongue tie dealt with, and with some good support from lactation consultants, we were able to get the latching. And it was really my belief at that time that with the concerted effort around pumping and having a good latch, my supply would just naturally come up.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a hiccup at the start of it, but it would come right.
Sure. And just to go back a few steps, with the supplementing, did you work with a lactation consultant or a midwife to get an understanding of how much you needed to supplement, or did you just sort of go on your intuition or the baby's cues? How did you have any?
Yeah, the midwife sort of gave us some guidance about how much we probably needed because he had lost that weight, and so we really wanted to make sure that he was getting enough energy for breastfeeding to be successful.
Sure.
So it's that fine balance.
Yeah. And did you find, other than the weight loss, was there anything that came up for you or your whanau or your midwife that indicated that baby might have needed more than he was getting?
Yeah, well, he was quite a big baby. I think he was 9 pounds 6, so he was a big baby, and I was an inexperienced mum, and I knew that he had lost weight, and like you do expect that to some extent, but I think all of us got a shock when we saw how much weight he had lost.
Sure.
And as I said, I was having issues with latching, but I was able to latch some of the time. It wasn't like I never could latch him. It just was very difficult, and it took a long time. And yeah, so I kind of thought that these were just the normal teething issues, and they would just get better with more practice. This is a brand new baby who didn't know how to breastfeed, and just with practice, we would get it right. So I had a lot of faith, actually,
wow.
it would all come right. And then I got a big shock when he lost all that weight, because it showed me that things were not going as well as I had thought that they were.
Yeah. And how did that sort of feel for you? I know for me, I did feel a bit of a sense of like, not failure, but, you know, just questioning what it was that I thought was going wrong. I felt like I was feeding the babies all the time and doing all the things that you think, and then you're like, oh, wow, okay, this is not, you know. What was that like for you?
I think it's a real emotional journey, because one, it's like you're a new mother, you're not getting enough sleep, things aren't going to plan. I was still optimistic that it would come right, but I was really struggling, and I think it's a tough time for mums, that first month especially. But I was lucky to have my husband at home for a month.
Wow, that's great.
I had good support from my family as well. So probably the strong feelings came a bit later, when I realised that my supply issues were not temporary but chronic.
Sure, yeah. So you'd done the tongue tie, you were doing a bit of supplementing, and thought, okay, we're going to be back on track. So
well, I had, when we went back from because, you know, the tongue tie procedure was done at the hospital.
Sure.
And the lactation consultant sat down and talked with me. I think that's at that point we started talking about the supplementary nursing system. They gave me the tube, and I had a pumping plan, and, you know, I had this big plan to get things back on track. And I was quite confident within a month or something we would be back on track, and I would be exclusively breastfeeding, which was my aspiration.
Sure. So can you, sorry, I know I keep going back.
Right.
Can you tell us, for people who don't know, what a supplementary nursing system is, or SNS, I hear some people calling it. And I know there's a few different types, but what did you sort of start off with?
It was a homemade system. So the lactation consultants gave me some small tubes that they had up at the hospital.
Yep.
And so I just basically put that into a bottle that had the formula in it. And so and then I would, once I got my boy latched, I would sort of poke it in the side.
The little tube.
The little tube.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that was I knew that that there was a real risk that my baby might start to prefer the bottle over the breast. While I had these supply issues. However, at that point in time, I didn't intend to use it long term. I had always thought that it was just a temporary strategy to basically keep the baby at the breast, encourage my supply because they're feeding and getting breast milk and formula basically at the same time. And I thought that was reinforcing those patterns around like encouraging the baby to feed at the breast. And especially in those early days, you know how babies are so starving, like straight away. And so they get very frustrated very quickly when the flow isn't fast enough for them.
Yeah, so it keeps the milk coming and keeps the baby at the breast.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
and you want to reward them for feeding at the breast, and you don't want them to become all frustrated and give up.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it was the lactation consultant at the hospital had talked to me about this. And so I got started, and of course I also, very early days, like day 14, like early days, I went along to a breastfeeding group for support, and that was also very invaluable, getting that support. So I was determined to breastfeed, and I went out and got all the help that I could to make it happen.
And were you doing the triple sort of, whatever they call it, feeding thing? So you're pumping, you're feeding the like express milk as well as the SNS?
Yeah.
Doing all it's a really exhausting.
So it was really exhausting, and I was lucky because my husband was at home.
Yeah.
Because I don't actually think I could have done it to that ability if he hadn't have been at home to support, because it's a pretty tough time, like babies feed a lot, and then you're pumping, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
So but my goal was to have it all sorted by the time he went back to work. But that didn't work out either.
Okay. Yeah, so you're getting going with that new sort of regime, and how did that work out for you?
Yeah, well, it became very evident quite quickly that my supply wasn't coming up to the extent that I'd heard others talk about, even though I was doing everything right.
Yeah.
And I had got a number of sort of like herbal supplements, fenugreek and all the ones that everybody recommends. And my supply was coming up. But, when I say I was probably giving him, say, 10% of what he needed when we first started, it kind of probably moved to 20%, like it was coming up, but it was not sufficient for my baby.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this is not going quite to plan. And I still have faith it would come right, but I thought this is going to take longer. And I went on domperidone. My midwife prescribed that, and it did help. So everything helped, but it still couldn't even get me to 50% of what I needed to feed my baby.
Yeah, so you were still sort of topping up on top of doing all of that and taking the herbs and taking the domperidone, which is a prescription medicine. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, so I really was chucking everything I could at the situation to try and increase my supply. And very gradually, I had to come to terms with the fact that actually I had a chronic issue. And probably those issues in the early days with the latch did not help the situation. But that the issue was more chronic than just supply and demand.
Sure.
There was some sort of medical issue underlying why I had these supply issues. Despite my best efforts, my supply didn't really come up to the level that was needed to feed my baby, and kind of a best case it was about 50%, and it was often more about 40%.
Sure.
It was a guess, but it was based on how much I needed to supplement.
Yeah.
Remembering that I was supplementing through the feeding tube.
Yeah.
So that my baby would just come off when he sort of had enough. And it became clear that the supply issues were not temporary, and were not related to supply and demand. Well, perhaps somewhat, but not 100% related to that. And we had an underlying cause, some sort of chronic medical cause. And that's probably when the emotions came in, Isis, because I had a great level of optimism, even though it was very difficult and stressful that time. I had faith that it would come right, that if I worked hard enough at it and I got all the support around me, it would come right in time.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't come right in time, despite my best efforts, despite all the support I had, lactation consultants and breastfeeding groups and a really supportive family. it didn't come right.
Yeah.
And that is probably when I felt most sad
Yeah.
about the situation, because you know, like a lot of mums, it's like you have these expectations about how it's going to go, and then it doesn't work out, and there's just a lot of grief for what could have been.
Absolutely. And I know it's like, this is going to be the fix, or oh, now I know this, I know that this is going to be the thing that makes all the difference, and you start going through that tick list, and then you get down to that point where you go, I've thrown everything at it and it's hopeless, it's not, you know, it's yeah, I really hear you.
Yeah, and it took a long time to come to terms with that. I'm actually completely to terms with it now, but of course it's 10 years later. You know, my boy's still going up. And the reason is that at that point in time, I was probably really focused about how much formula he was getting, and the failure of the breastfeeding relationship. That's how I was feeling. But actually, in time, I kind of switched the other way into that it was a successful breastfeeding relationship.
Yeah.
That despite these difficulties, actually we got through.
Yeah.
And I stopped using formula at a year.
Yeah.
And actually I kept breastfeeding till he was a toddler.
Yeah, awesome. And you sort of, in a way, you get back to being a fully breastfeeding, right?
Yeah,
by definition.
Had food in there at that point in
exactly.
time. So that
yeah.
That was what was providing the energy needs. And I kind of saw my breast milk as helping with immunity.
Yeah.
And also all the other things that come from a breastfeeding relationship, like comfort and managing pain and sickness and all these other things that you get from comforting your child with breastfeeding. So the wider picture, and it did take a long time to come to terms with that. But now I think actually, you know, I'm proud that I breastfeed my baby. And even though at times it might have only been 10%, and at a good week it was probably 50%, I breastfed my baby until he was a toddler.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such an important message, because it can feel in some ways, you know, when people talk about what a successful breastfeeding journey looks like what does that mean? And I think for myself, after the same with you, you know, reflecting a lot on that, it looks like whatever it looks like, and that it's so different for each individual, and it can feel like, you know, it's what your journey was supposed to look like. And I think that, yeah, you should be really proud of everything you've done. And I really loved for myself when I got to that point where they were introducing solids and we were able to drop the supplementing. That, yeah, it was like, well, you're just like any other, you know, breastfeeding person now, because it's all the same once they get to that age and they're eating food. It's, you're all in there together.
Yeah, and actually the difficulties were actually such a short part of his life. And at the time I couldn't see that, but now he's 10.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's just like a blink in time.
Yeah.
Those times, those difficult months. Because probably by the time he was about 4 months, I had got it really sorted. Like, I'd come to terms with the fact that it is what it is. I had a system in place and it was working. I'd got the hang of using it in public. You know, like, I made it work. It wasn't perfect, but I made it work.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so how long did you use the SZS for? Like,
a year.
Yeah, okay, wow, yeah. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, they say, the lactations consultants said that usually people just use this as a temporary measure.
Yeah.
And they don't know really anybody who used it long term, but I used it long term. And we had lots of sort of dramas with spilt bottles and all kinds of things, but we figured out a system. We bought one of those bottles that had a plain flat lid on it that
Yep.
you get for storing like express breast milk.
Yep.
And then my husband drilled a hole in it.
Oh, cool. So you just had a little thing for the tube.
Yeah, and then we just put the tube. So
Sure.
that I was able to get a supply of those
Okay.
tubes.
Yep.
And there's also a little homemade system.
Yeah.
And when I was at home, I just had it in a little ice cream container on the table beside me. And then when I was out, I bought myself an insulated black like lunch bag.
Yeah.
And so I was able to have it in there, and I put it down the side of me. And honestly, like hardly anyone noticed.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? You get to that point where you think, oh no, look at all this fiddly stuff, and then you think, actually, you know what? No one's looking.
No, they aren't. Actually, they're looking everywhere but.
Yeah.
So actually, because I wore a lot of black clothing, and so it just sort of blended in with my clothing, and I got my technique. Like in those early days, it was really awkward. Like it's so hard to get a hang of that tube and getting it in and keeping your baby latched. However, you're feeding your baby a lot, so you have lots of opportunities to practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, with persistence, you do get quite,
good
at doing it. Yeah.
And so, like, when you found out you were pregnant with your second baby, did you have the same midwife, or did you have someone else, and did you discuss your issues with supply with them when you were pregnant, or?
Yeah, I did. So the other thing that I had done in my first baby was I had come across the book Making More Milk by Diana West, which I found very, very useful, and attempt to kind of like explain what some of these medical issues might be that was causing this underlying supply.
Yeah.
And so I really relied on that book as well. And so I developed a plan with my midwife to do colostrum harvesting, which I did, and I didn't get much, but I got some.
And when did you start that?
I can't actually remember, but it was sometime maybe about 30 weeks or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
But sometime in the third trimester.
Yeah. So I froze it. So it was basically I was expressing, and I was getting just droplets of the colostrum, just droplets. And then I used a syringe to draw it up.
Yeah.
And then when I had sort of like literally, I wasn't getting much, but I might have got like a mil.
Sure.
And then I put it in a little had little
like little sterile bags or something.
Yeah. I put them actually, I think the whole syringe in there.
Sure.
And then froze it. Yeah.
And did your midwife help you to get that stuff, or did you just okay.
Yeah, my midwife helped me, and my sister's also a midwife, and she really helped me. Nice. That's what I mean. I had good support. I had really good support. I had amazing support, and my sister came and helped me. She came over and helped me for like hours and hours with that process, because it took me ages to get the hang of it.
And I just wanted to touch on that point of having all that support. It's something that I've reflected on a lot myself. A lot of the time I do hear, people talking about, again, breastfeeding and making it work and successful breastfeeding. And a lot of this sort of narrative is like, well, you just need to, if you just need more support, or you've just got to do this, or you've got to persevere, you've got to do those things, and then it'll all come right. Sometimes I feel like the people who have, for whatever reason, if it doesn't go according to your own plans, or according to whatever society thinks is the right way, I sometimes feel frustrated at that idea of that sort of stuff around, like, if you just have enough support, or you just have the right support, or things like that, that'll all work out. And I hear, obviously, for you that you've worked past that, but I guess, how do you feel about that, and how do you think that we can sort of change the way that we talk about breastfeeding journeys and the diversity of that, sort of for other people who feel the same way, that it's not just a matter of trying really hard or getting the right support, it still might not work the way that you might have expected, or that you think that society expects? of you. Does that
Yeah,
make
well,
sense?
yeah, it does. And
Mm.
when my eldest boy was 9 months, I trained as a breastfeeding peer counsellor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was to support other mums who'd been through similar kind of, or were going through similar experiences. And then I was also involved in some breastfeeding groups. But you know, I think that was my attitude at the start, like
Mm.
that I've got good support. I will get the support I need because I was determined, because I said I came from a breastfeeding family, that I'd seen breastfeeding as just a normal part of life, and I expected to do that. And then it didn't work out. And I think it's the feeling of not knowing where to go or what to do because the normal things aren't working.
Mm.
And that's when I think it's really important for people to be able to access additional help, both professional help and also peer support from other
Yeah.
mums who've been through that, because
Yeah.
it's I since I trained as a breastfeeding peer counsellor, I have talked to lots of mums with supply issues,
Mm.
and some of them are temporary issues where they pump and it does come up and it kind of gets back on track. And actually, many mums were the same as me and had really chronic issues. And despite their best attempts, they could not get it up to the level that they wanted. So
Yeah.
these mums have come to me because that's my experience. So
It must have felt
yeah,
really
like
good
yeah.
it must have felt really affirming to have someone like you understanding what they're going through and their experience. It's the beauty, I guess, of the peer counsellor. And that's something that we could have a whole discussion on. And lucky for us, we are going to, because I think we've got in the lead up to World Breastfeeding Week, we're going to be talking to some people from the Christchurch peer counsellor program. Was that the one that you did living?
Yes. Yeah, I did it through Te Pōwaitanga.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was a long time ago now. That was like 9.5 years ago.
Okay.
But and it was quite early on in the program. I think it was the second intake or third intake.
Yeah. Awesome.
You know, I just really got so much value out of that course, and I am still friends with some of the people that I met through that course.
That's awesome. So leading into your second pregnancy, you were really armed with obviously a lot of knowledge and information. You've done the peer counsellor program, you've had your experience, you read the book. And you did the colostrum harvesting. Was there anything else that you did differently? Did your midwife prescribe the domperidone again, or did you think? Yeah, was there any sort of ideas around what was the particular sort of issue that you were having? Did you glean any of that and do anything differently other than the harvesting?
Yeah, well, I never quite really decided what the issue was.
Yeah.
But I think it was something to do with an endocrine issue around hormones and insulin or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to nail like specifically.
Yeah, we never actually came to to like the exact explanation.
Yeah.
But basically, I thought, right, I'm going to be prepared for if it goes, if I have similar issues. But I was hopeful, the fact that this was my second baby, that if I could get that first critical week right, that I might be in a much better place. Because of course I had also read in Making More Milk that the first couple of weeks are actually quite critical in the breastfeeding relationship. So I thought that if I could get it sorted right from the start, I had hoped that I might get to 100%, but I kind of in the back of my mind thought maybe not. Yeah. So I had a bit of a plan in that I was well networked. I knew a lot of breastfeeding mums, and I had some people who I'd arranged to ask for donor milk if needed.
Nice. Yeah.
And so I got started like with the breastfeeding. things, went well right from the start. Actually, I think my boy had a tongue tie again, but we got it cut like day 3. We knew what we were looking for. We got it sorted, got the latch done. We had the colostrum, and yes, despite my best efforts, I was probably starting at about 40% of what he needed. So it was better than my first experience.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't enough.
And did you go on the domperidone starting at the beginning, just out of
right
interest?
at the start?
Yeah.
Everything. Everything. I threw everything at it right from the start.
Yeah.
In the hopes that we would get the supply up. And it was up. I think probably it was about 50, maybe 60%. But it was still not enough.
And again, was that like a weight loss sort of signaling? Yeah.
It was a weight loss. We kept a really close eye on it because of my problems. Also, so it was pumping right from the start. I had a double pump, so I did everything kind of differently right from the start. And as I said, I still needed to supplement, and I was able to source donor milk through my friends, which was amazing. Like, you would not believe the number of people who I talked to. It's quite embarrassing to ask people about these things. However, I got over that, and I asked my friends, and they were just so amazing. And sometimes, like, things wouldn't last as long as I wanted, like the supply of the donor milk I had. And I had one friend who I called her, and she started pumping, and then her husband just brought it over at 9 o'clock at night.
It's so
because
awesome.
I was like, I don't know if I've got enough to get overnight. So but the reason I was able to use donor milk was I knew people. I was much better networked and resourced than I had been the first time round. I would never have been able to use donor milk with my first baby because I didn't know anyone.
Yeah, and these people were obviously all breastfeeding at the time. Did they have babies the similar age of you, or or was it varied?
Similar, a mix.
Yeah. It's great. I had a friend, just thinking of again myself, as you do. I had a girlfriend who actually with my third baby, and she offered to give me milk. She was feeding around the same time, and I was so surprised. But just it was so lovely of her to do that. So it's really.
I know. I will always be grateful because it was a gift that they were giving us. A gift of their time. Like it's especially when you're a mum, pumping is not easy. And they did that. And also through some of the milk sharing pages, I was able to get some big supplies. Like some of the mums who'd been in NICU and might have accumulated like several litres in the freezer. And once they were home and things were going well, they donated that to other mums.
Sure.
So there was a bit of the milk sharing pages as well. But my goal at that point was to get donor milk going until he was 6 months old. And then I was intending to switch to formula because I knew, like it would be really hard to go any longer than that. But when I got to 6 months old, all those people said, no, we're not stopping. And actually we got donor milk through to a year. Incredible way.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. And just these my friends basically were, giving up half an hour a day, which is a lot of time when you're a mum, and we're like pumping, and then would give me like a lot at the end of the week, and I have it in the freezer.
Little team of milk mamas.
I know.
Yeah, nice.
Incredible. And so my youngest boy was 100% breastfed.
Just not 100% of your milk. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Wow. And so just with the people that, with the milk that you got off the milk sharing pages, those people generally tend to be a little bit more sort of formal in the sharing of milk, right? I think from what I know, they often have people who've been screened or lifestyle screening, things like that, if they're donating that larger amount of milk. and then you've
Yeah.
got people who you know well yourself that you can sort of trust. Because I know people feel a bit funny about milk sharing or donor milk sometimes, but I think that it makes sense if there's someone that you know, or if they've been screened, like it's something that's happened forever. Other people feeding other people's babies or sharing their milk. It's something that's quite common, but something that we probably don't talk about a lot.
Yeah, well, I think at that stage, they had the milk bank at NICU was going.
Oh,
And
yes.
so many of these mums, especially in the NICU, were donating to that bank as well.
Right.
But so they had been all through this very rigorous screening. So it was something I made a great deal of effort to find out about and be very informed about, and make sure I was asking the right questions and seeing the right, because they were testing for various things. So it was all very robust. I felt very confident that it was a safe choice for my son, because I had made that real effort to kind of investigate and ask those questions.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that's pretty amazing, and so cool that you're still in touch with lots of those people who supported you through that journey. It's a really incredible thing. And are you still working as a peer counsellor?
Well, I actually had a job for a period of time, a paid part-time job running a couple of breastfeeding groups, just a few hours a week. And then I stopped doing that, but I remained as a volunteer breastfeeding peer counsellor. And I'm still a peer counsellor, and I'm happy to help people, but probably over time, I haven't got so many calls. I just think because my kids are older. And there's probably other mums who are coming through who've still got young children, who are being asked for some of those things. But I'll always be willing to help people, especially if I've got those supply issues, because there's something that is close to my heart, is to really encourage mums that keep going, even if it's not quite what you thought it would be.
It doesn't need to be an all or nothing sort of success or failure type situation. I'm wondering if along the way in your journey, were there things that, other than obviously amazing support from your whanau and from your friends and the donor milk that you got, I wonder if there was anything that happened through your journey, both in terms of the community that you live in, or the friends that you had, or the health professionals that you looked after, that was sort of helpful or not helpful for you in your journey, and whether there's anything that you could share as advice to people who are supporting people like you in your situation through their breastfeeding journeys, some of the things that they might want to think about in terms of their care or support.
Yeah, I felt like I had excellent support, and also I went out and got that support. And I know that sometimes it's hard for people, especially people who've got transport difficulties, to go and get that support. But I basically went out. I had a car, so I went out and found it, and that was an advantage for me. And I think the things that really helped was the faith, first of all, that it would get better. So I heard that message from lots of people. It kind of didn't quite go to standard, but actually at that point in time, I really needed that encouragement.
It would keep you motivated.
Keep me going. And then when it became evident that that things would not kind of get to where I wanted it to be, that kind of reassurance that it was still a breastfeeding relationship, and what I was doing was still of value.
Absolutely.
Because I did have the odd comment, not from people in breastfeeding circles, but just sort of people. Like, what's the point? What's the point when you're only giving a small amount of milk?
Did you ever have any experience with pediatricians or pediatrics or anything like that, or through your GP who had opinions about the way you were feeding your babies?
No, actually, I
Yeah.
never got any comments from any health professionals. It was just kind of like other people, just random people who I
Sure.
might come across in my life. No, because I think I was just so confident, nobody was going to argue with me.
Yeah, you were on top of it. You knew what you were doing. You had
And
a
I think
plan.
that is that is important, I think, when you are engaging with health professionals. If you are confident that in your choices that this is the right thing for your baby, people are less likely to argue with you than if you're unsure or uncertain.
Yeah.
Maybe they try and talk you out of it. But I never
Yeah.
had any health professionals. They were just like, oh, okay, and then yeah.
Nice. And there's just so many things that could ask you. Are your sons, now that they're a bit older, are they aware that they ever had other people's milk? Do they have opinions about breastfeeding? Given that you do what you
Yeah.
do and you've come from a breastfeeding whanau and things, are they, is that something that you've talked about with them?
Well, you'd think that would be the case, but they're still around breastfeeding because we've got other people in our whānau who are breastfeeding.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of them told me that he was raised on juice. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's sweet.
Cool. Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I've never had a discussion with either of my boys who are similar age to yours, 9 and 7, about feeding, but I just wondered, I thought it'd be interesting. My youngest daughter, so she had milk from me and my sister and my best friend, and it'll be interesting to see if that's something that we talk about one day, and I think it's those things that help normalize what that looks like, so that when she's when they're older, if they decide to have children, it might be something that they can take with them. Just
Yeah. Well, I would hope that they have a normal way, like a normalized idea. And I might have said some comments to them, but I think I've mainly said that they were breastfed.
Yeah.
In that context, and that's when the comment came, no, they were breastfed, they were raised on juice.
Raised on juice. Great.
But the other thing I just want to go back to was about some comments that were unhelpful.
Yeah.
So I did experience some unhelpful comments. I said a few people did say, oh, what's the point? But the other thing people often did, and they meant very, very well, is they said things, oh, have you tried pumping? Have you tried lactation cookies?
Yeah.
And I tried to keep a good humor about it because I know that they meant well.
Yeah.
But actually, the thing is, yes, I had tried all those things.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah, it's like a woman with that hyperemesis gravida or whatever it is, the severe morning sickness, getting told to eat ginger nuts or something.
Yeah. And they meant well, but I just I did have that quite a lot.
Yeah.
People give me advice to try the basics.
Yeah.
But of course, I'd already tried all those basics, so it wasn't that helpful. But I did try and keep good humor about that because I knew that they meant well.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was told by actually some lactation consultants and others in the community is it's very difficult to use a supplementary nursing system long term. Now that could perhaps be true, but I think actually it would have been better to say you can use a supplementary nursing system long term.
So come from a sort of strength-based approach or a positive rather than a negative.
So the truth was it was quite difficult. But but I did do it. And like it can be done. It is a bit of work, but like actually formula is a lot of work because you've got to do all the cleaning of the bottles and everything like that. The same was true with the supplementary nursing system.
Sure.
It was really about managing the cleaning of everything.
Yeah. It is a lot of work as well as the pumping and all of those things. And I think this is why these discussions are really important, because I really want to make sure that we highlight how diverse and dynamic and beautiful our journeys can be, and that there is no sort of right or wrong way. I do know for me, again, with that sort of well-meaning comment side of things, that when I was struggling with supply and really wanting to stay attached to my breastfeeding relationship, people wanted to say, oh, look, it doesn't really matter, you know, it's all the same, fed is best, and, you know, if your baby's fed and you're happy, then, you know, what's the difference? And while, you know, while that is absolutely true for some people, sometimes I think it can feel dismissive of what you're doing and how hard you're trying to get the breastfeeding established if someone diminishes that to a thing that doesn't really matter, or, you know, and I know that comes from a good place sometimes, but it's not always helpful. I'd put that for myself in one of those categories of maybe not so helpful, because you don't know what it means to an individual to be able to achieve certain things. I know one time at a big latch-on event that we had, there was one mum and she managed to have a 1 minute feed with her baby, a latch to the breast, and it really did mean everything to her. She has had some really, like, quite an incredible journey. But if someone was to turn around to her and say, oh, don't worry about it, well, you just give the baby a bottle, which she obviously was, but yeah, you don't want to diminish the work that people are putting into it, because you don't know where that's coming from for them. So I think it's that highlighting those journeys and all the amazing things that we do to be able to achieve the things that are important for ourselves and our whanau is so important, but so different person to person.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is about recognizing and kind of understanding that breastfeeding is more than just the delivery of food. It kind of feels like that in the early days, but over time it is so much more than just the delivery of food. And I think women who breastfeed do understand that, because all of these things are mixed up together. When you're breastfeeding, you're both feeding your baby, but you're also bonding with your baby. You're comforting your baby. It's all of these things.
In a way that's important to you, right? Because of course it's like you can do that in all sorts of other ways. But if that's something that's important to you and the way that you see life and the way that you mother and parent, then it's hugely important.
Yeah, and so it's like, yes, maybe at times my baby wasn't getting much of my breast milk, but they were cuddled into me, and it was that whole relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and as I said, like, over time I was able to increase it, not as much as I wanted, but it was far more than just the delivery of breast milk and through the supplementary feeding system, either, you know, donor milk or formula. It was the whole experience, and that's what I look back on. With my oldest boy, you know, I had sort of these difficulties for maybe 3 or 4 months, and now he's 10. And with my youngest boy, things were sorted a bit earlier because I knew what I was doing. You know, it was such a short moment in the breastfeeding relationship, and it's such a short moment in their whole life.
Sure. So, and how long did you feed your second for? I know your first was
toddler as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's an amazing journey of its own, isn't it? Just realizing how different that is when, you know, when they're that bit older. I think it's a really special time too. It's a whole different relationship and respect and all things that are
with the teething, or you know, when they're not well and all these other things. So yeah, it's just like those moments where when I felt like I wanted to give up and it was all too hard, and all those feelings that I had, you know, grief and disappointment, they were how I felt at the time, but they're not how I feel now.
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of those things are kind of gone, you know, like it's like, actually it was okay.
Yeah, you can really be stuck in the moment and the helplessness of it all, and then you just go on a journey and suddenly you turn around and your child's 10.
Yeah, yeah, and
Raised
it's
on
like,
juice.
you know, we did it. Yeah, raised on juice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just like finally, one, like if there's anything else you wanted to add, but also I was just interested to know if someone wanted to become a breastfeeding peer counsellor like yourself. So obviously there's a program in Christchurch that helps people through that.
Yeah, there was a couple of providers. So there was, I think, the Mother for Mother breastfeeding peer counsellor course, and there was also the one run through Te Po Waitanga, which was a well child provider in Christchurch. And they held a breastfeeding course,
Sure.
a breastfeeding group, which was quite close to my house, which is why I ended up there. And just after I'd been going for several weeks to the group, and then I trained up as a counsellor. But they put calls out through Facebook.
Okay, so it's something that's still happening.
Yeah, yeah.
And is there a cost involved?
No, it was free.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
10 weeks or something like that.
Cool.
And you bought your baby.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So you just need to have breastfed before being a peer.
Yeah. So I was still breastfeeding at the time, but some mums had finished their breastfeeding, recently finished their breastfeeding, but probably the majority was still breastfeeding at that point in time when they did the course.
Cool.
But you remain a breastfeeding peer counsellor even if you finish breastfeeding yourself.
Sure.
Because the point is really just to share your knowledge as it comes up in your life. So these days I don't know that many mums who are breastfeeding just because my boys are older.
Yeah.
I do know a few, but I don't know as many. But certainly at that time, like as a mum, you're always encountering other mums, just in your life as you go about going to places.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it was helping people that I knew. Sometimes it was having referrals, and sometimes it was helping mums through the breastfeeding groups. Yeah, but I often help mums at like random places, like at the library and other things like that.
Yeah.
You know, like if we got talking and I said, oh, I was doing the breastfeeding pickups, people say, oh, I've got a question.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's really about it for me. We've been chatting for a while. Was there anything else that you wanted to share or ask or?
No, that sounds great, Isis.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think that this has been a really great chat, and I know that people will get a lot out of this and hopefully help other people in their journey. So thank you so much, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.